Hello, Lance Turner of ArkansasBusiness.com here. A couple of weeks ago, as part of our Virus Diary series on businesses dealing with the fallout of COVID-19, we talked to Ken Clark of Chenal Family Therapy about how his business was faring in the middle of this pandemic. But Ken also shared some things about the pressures that small business owners and executives are facing amid this unprecedented pandemic. And we thought we'd like to get back with Ken and talk to him a little bit more about those pressures, what he's seeing, and maybe share some tips about how small business owners and executives can get by during these times. And so we dialed up Ken on Zoom the other day, and this is our conversation. Well, thanks, Ken, for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about some of these issues that small business owners, executives of all types are facing right now. Mm. Usually these folks are under immense stress anyway, in the best of times. But now, of course, that stress is amped up. How is now different from what you usually see?
So now is different in some liberating ways and some terrifying ways, right? Now is different in the sense that no matter what we do, it may not make a difference, right? So a lot of us as CEOs, as business owners, leaders, we've gotten used to our ability to pull off stuff if we lean into it, try hard enough, burn the midnight oil. We have a really high belief in our own self-efficacy, as we call it. And so this is different, right? That there may be no way to outrun the tidal wave, no matter how fast you run, right? And so I think a lot of leaders are feeling paralyzed where they're used to feeling like, okay, I just need to lean in here. At the same time, we find that liberating a little bit because half of the pressure that we carry is probably to perform, and we're the hardest critics on ourselves and things like that. And in an environment where there's so many things beyond your control, for once, it's not completely on the leader's shoulders, right? Mm-hmm. When everybody's doing well and you do poorly, then I guess it's really on you. But in this environment, man, we're all struggling, and if you are able to even do something halfway miraculous, you're a hero. So it's a double-edged sword to kind of have your hands tied.
Right, and I guess now too the stakes are a lot higher than they've ever been, obviously, because you're dealing with not only the financial health and probably these existential questions about whether your business will survive, but also the health and survivability of your employees from a mental health standpoint and from a production standpoint, but also from just their lives are at stake if things go the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. We put a lot of positive pressure on leaders over the last 20, 30 years to develop themselves culturally and to create or to destroy the divide between the C-suite and the rank and file and to identify with our folks. We live in a culture of undercover boss where, we want to feel what these folks are feeling. And so they're not just numbers anymore. This is not your father's C-suite. And so I think a lot of us carry a lot of pressure to make sure these folks are taken care of. We know this is their livelihoods. And we've done a good job of recognizing we were in their shoes at some point. So I think there's more pressure than ever on CEOs and leaders. Not only are they the person leading the company and making sure that continues to exist, but we're in the middle of performing life-saving surgery on household finances for hundreds of employees. That's just an immense amount of pressure, all while trying to not freak out about our own situation as individuals.
Right. So all of this can be really isolating for people at the top. So what are those kind of challenges like for someone who's got to make these decisions, and what are some ways that they can start to kind of make some headway and do well in those conditions?
Yeah. So one of the things I believe as a CEO, as a psychotherapist, as an executive coach, is unchallenged fears become unchallenged facts, right? Unchallenged assumptions become integrated as beliefs, and we're already isolated anyway. I mean, that's part of why you see CEOs make decisions where you're like, how did you not think that would backfire? Right. That happens anyway in the best of times, and then in these times, right? we're sitting here wondering about the demise of the business, if that's possible, while simultaneously telling people, don't worry, we'll figure it out. And so we're really walled off, and maybe even from our spouse and our kids and all that. And in that vacuum, right, we can get some really distorted conclusions, beliefs about what's acceptable, what needs to happen, what responsibility is on us. So more than ever, we're an advocate for executives having somebody to talk to that gets them, right? It could be a therapist who's lived in that world or just has a lot of life experience. It could be peer groups. I'm an absolute huge fan of peer groups, YPO, Vistage, things like that, for executives, where we can all just kind of close the door for once and have a bunch of people that get us. But that's the thing, is you've got to do it. And what we know, just like going to the gym and working out, executive vulnerability, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Mm-hmm. The wrong time to start working out probably is the day after you have a heart attack, right? I guess it's better late than never, but gosh, if you would have done this all along, we might have avoided this. And so even right now, right, it's one of those ones of don't wait as an executive. Reach out, ask for mentorship, ask where your fellow executives find their peer advisory. Do it now, because it takes a while to develop that vulnerability where you let down the guard and say, I'm scared, or I feel like an imposter, or things like that. So, but that's the big one. It's tough to feel understood from somebody who hasn't walked in your shoes. And that's a pretty small crowd when you're in our shoes.
So what should the interaction be like between the business owner or the executive and the rank and file, the employees? I mean, we, at our group, at our management team, we talk a lot about, how much information is too much information for our employees sometimes. I mean, you want to keep them in the loop about important issues. And so you want to be a little bit vulnerable about the real possibilities that we're facing, but you also don't want to cause a panic, right? So how do you go about making those decisions?
So I've got a 4-pronged communication strategy that I encourage in general, not even in the crisis environment, but in the crisis environment, leaders to look at. So the 4 prongs are: here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's what we're doing about the near-term future, and here's how I, as your leader, am doing, right? That, as Brene Brown says, who's a brilliant thought leader in both my field as a therapist and in the business field now, there's a difference between vulnerability and transparency, right? That I can be vulnerable without having to show them everything. And so those 4 things, right? Here's what I know. Here's how this, the unemployment numbers came out. Here's how it's affecting us. Here's what I don't know about how that's going to affect us, what it looks like in 2 or 3 months. Here's what we're doing to mitigate that, to plan. And then here's how I'm doing. And the how I'm doing piece is a super important piece that a lot of executives neglect, right? Because the listener, the employee, the rank and file, they're looking for some credibility in me that what I'm speaking is truth. Right. And one of the truths I can give the clearest is I'm scared too. Now, bravery is action in the face of fear, not the absence of fear. So I'm brave. We got this. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. But I'm right there with you guys. I'm worried about your jobs. I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about all of our jobs. So giving all 4 of those together and then revealing some self at the end creates a bond between the leader and the employee, instead of just another hard to believe email from the top, right? And we're in an environment where if you say everything's fine, nobody's going to believe you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like trying to reassure people as the Titanic is sinking that, we're good. Yeah. Are you serious, boss? Do you see what's happening?
Right.
Yeah. So that's the 4-pronged approach. What we do know, what we don't know, what we're doing about it, and here's how I, as your leader, am doing. I provide that to my employees on a weekly basis through a short optional Zoom meeting, right? They already are drowning in Zoom content.
Right.
So we record it. You can show up if you want. You can ask Ken questions. It's 30 minutes. If nobody shows up, that's fine. But it's recorded and released internally after that, so people can check in whenever they want. And I think that soothes their fear that something's being hidden from them. It's there if you want. If you don't want to look at it this week, don't look at it, right?
Right.
So that's the strategy.
And that was part one of our conversation with Ken Clark, the founder of Chenal Family Therapy of Little Rock. Later this week, we'll have more from Ken on some tips and advice for small business owners and other executives dealing with these stressful times.